I'm David Zeitlin from the University of Oxford. I have co-curated the exhibition Photo Cameroon Studio Portraiture 1970-1990s with Erica Jones from the Fowler Museum. In this talk, I want to answer the question that I get asked from time to time: how come these photos are here? How did I meet these photographers in the first place? Well, I am a cultural anthropologist and I've been doing research in one village, Sommier, most years since 1985. In the late 1990s, prompted in fact by an exhibition in London of work by Seydou Keita, I realised that I had no idea who had taken the similar photographs that I had seen in Cameroon. So when I was next back there, I started asking around and I asked about local photographers, and so I was introduced to Finlac in the village of Atta, a little to the south of Sommier, and Chila in the town of Mayodale, a bit to the north. Having started to work with them and their relatively small collections of old medium format negatives, Chila suggested that I should meet his patron, who he said had kept all his old negatives. So we travelled together to Buda and Chila introduced me to Jacques Toussaint. It was on that trip that I first encountered Toussaint's archive. To give an idea of the scope of what we had to deal with, consider this image. If you look closely, behind the stool on which the boy is sitting is a pile of boxes. These are old photo paper boxes, and it was in these that the old negatives, as well as a few uncollected or sample prints, were stored. A few years later, the British Library in London started their Endangered Archives programme, and working with the Cameroon National Archives and the British Council in Cameroon, I was able to get funding to scan Jacques' archives. To get a more detailed idea of the scale of the project, the photo with the little boy shows 17 boxes in 2 columns, 3 boxes deep. 17 is actually an average of the differing heights of the columns. That would give a total of 204 boxes. In actual fact, we ended up scanning 183 such boxes containing about 47,000 images, mainly negatives, but as I've said, there's a few thousand prints. So each box contained about 260 negatives. Scanning took place at the British Council offices in Yaoundé, the capital of Cameroon, and a team of local researchers in Buda worked with Jacques, who was still alive at that point, to prepare an outline catalogue working from prints made from the scans. One of the issues that became clear during that documentation phase is that full names are not used and are not widely known. People don't tend to share full names in daily interactions. For example, Jacques was widely known as a photographer, but known to most people in Buda only as Photo Jacques, with only immediate family knowing him as Jacques Toussaint. He himself did not keep records, and he didn't need to know people's names. Someone would come to the studio to have their photograph taken, then return to collect the prints without full names being used by the clients or recorded by the photographer. When he was asked to take photographs at a client's home, directions would be given to a house, possibly including a first name or a title, which would be sufficient to identify a house in a locality. None of this needed the full names of clients to be known, let alone remembered. So in the archive, we have names for very few people, only a few who are well known, such as the local politician Poufon Etienne, an early deputy, an early senator at the National Assembly, or the very prominent businessman Christophe Forfier, the chair of the coffee growing co-op. Forfier also had international connections. Here he is with a visiting white man, although no one knows who this stranger might be. There's a suggestion that it was something to do with Lions Club International, an organisation that links business people around the world. But named people like this are the exceptions. Even chiefs tend not to be known by their name, but rather by the locality of their chieftaincy. It took a lot more work, which was possible only for a tiny number of images, to be able to record the full names of the people depicted. And one example from the exhibition is of Chief Thomas Fauchomo, the chief of Babete, and his wife Mefire Madeleine. Now, there were inevitably problems with the archiving process. Scanning in bulk has problems. Some photos were reversed when the negatives were placed in the scanner the wrong way up. When these have been noticed subsequently, we've corrected them. But some anomalies persist, and there's bound to be examples that we haven't yet noticed. Consider the following image, which actually comes from Samuel Finlach's archives. Question is it reversed? The cloth is clearly backwards, but several people have watches on their left hands, as is normal with right-handed people. So if we flip the image to make the cloth correct, the watches would be wrong. Most likely, the cloth was put on inside out, so the image on it is reversed, and it has actually been correctly scanned. But the dilemma for the archivist, I hope now, is clear. In any case, in order to confirm the identity of the cloth, we had to flip the image, which showed that it was a cloth showing the first president of Cameroon, President Ahidjo, which dates the image to before 1980. Now, as you have seen, originally Toussaint's negatives were stored in cardboard boxes. They were not in protective sleeving, and in the last studio building, the roof leaked, so water ran down the walls in the rainy season, and in some cases the rainwater got into the boxes. This meant that some negatives were damaged beyond repair, and quite a few, about 3,000, had patches of damage. One of Jacques' other former apprentices helped clean and rescue the most damaged boxes. Where the negatives are stuck together, they had to be soaked apart and then dried before they could be scanned. Overall, though, most of the negatives were in remarkably good condition, but not in every case. The prints, which I have mentioned, themselves were vulnerable not only to damp, but also to termites. And as I've said, the damp could do terrible things to the emulsion on the negatives, although sometimes this resulted in a strange beauty all of its own. And among the damaged negatives is one of Jacques and his motorcycle, which I think makes a nice way to conclude the presentation. I like the way the photographer, with physical evidence of his success in the form of the motorbike, emerges, how they emerge from the signs of decay. In a way, this takes me back to the things that were said in the 19th century about photography and fading memory. The name, the memory, and the photo persist. Thank you very much.